right, Brooke, good afternoon. We're back after a bit of a hiatus, a bit of a layoff. What's happening?
That's right. Welcome back. Happy New Year. We are, we're ready to get back at it. So it's been a little while of a break, but I missed you.
Well, good to hear. Yeah, you never know. We don't hear from someone in a while if there's still something there. Sometimes it takes a little while to get things back up and going. So for those listening again, we're a bit rusty, maybe. So if we step over each other a little bit and that sort of thing, we should be good. But probably a decent intro to Tim, because it seems like you guys go way back. So Brooke, would love to know how you originally connected with Tim. Then we'll kick it over his way for kind of his intro.
Yeah. So I met Tim. Gosh, he was probably one of the first people I met in the short-term rental industry. So goes back to like 2007. I'm launching Vantage. I know nobody. I don't live in the town. And I came down to Ocean City and ended up meeting a couple, John and Aaron with Coastal Style Magazine. And I told them what we were building, and they said, well, you have to meet Tim. And Tim was kind of doing some really cool stuff with ResortQuest at the time, digital marketing. I'll let him tell his story, and he was nice enough to kind of take me under his wing a little bit. And, every time I'd come into town, we'd either grab a drink or go out to dinner or grab lunch, and, just kind of taught me the kind of the short-term rental industry, because I knew absolutely nothing. And I had to learn very, very quickly. So he was very, very generous to do that. And excited to have him on the podcast. Funny, it's, 18 years later, Tim, here we are. So
I was going to say, Brooke, it's 2026. You're talking about a story from 2007. It's not too far from 20 years, really, right? It's 19 and change, depending on when we measure it. So good story there. Well, Tim, it sounds like you go way back, but maybe give us a little bit of the timeline, kind of how you got in the short-term rentals, what you're focused on today. A little bit of the in-between would be helpful.
Sure. So I was working in newspapers down here, and my wife was working for Coastal Resorts, which was one of the original roll-up companies that formed ResortQuest. And their PR guy left, and I ran into some folks at her company, one of her company events, and they said, you have to interview. And I'm like, I'm not going to the dark side. It's not going to happen. And walked in, had an interview just to keep her happy. And the offer they made me, I had no counter for. So ended up starting with them in just after New Year's 2021. I'm sorry, 2001. And my job, and I quote, was to write a couple press releases a month and play golf. Shortly thereafter, I was the only one left. We had a couple shakeups in the company, and I was it for a couple of years. And then obviously, Coastal Resorts fully branded into ResortQuest. ResortQuest, through its death throes, got picked up by Gaylord. And then subsequently from that, it was parted out to Leucadia, and then it was sold to Wyndham Vacation Rentals, and then ultimately to Vacasa, where my journey there ended, like so many other people, on May 20th, 2020, on a Google call with 107 people. Ish. So that's the short ride through most of the history of the resort win casa model, as I like to call it. So
you're one of the few people that saw the whole journey for all three of those companies. That's pretty crazy. Actually, four companies, even going previous to ResortQuest, even.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's been it's been a ride. I didn't make it to Casago, so but it was quite a journey.
This is slightly off topic, Tim. This is more professional curiosity, this one at this point. Was there a homeowner that you worked with through that whole time? So they had a condo or a property that went through all four companies. Do you recall anyone that maybe would have been through that whole journey together? Or was there enough churn or changes where that would have never occurred?
No, there were several. Specifically, we represented, and when I got there, we had, I think 100% of our inventory was at Sea Colony, which is a resort, oceanfront, and tennis community just south of Bethany Beach. And there were a couple. I still fondly recall some of them. Some of them, I wake up in the middle of the night and go, I'm glad I'm not there anymore. But the DeHages were fantastic, and they're a case study in the journey of how we succeeded and failed in educating homeowners about the changing market, the changing nature of short-term rentals. There were some others. One of them who who had the last name Fisher, spelled with a C, not related in any possible way. But he used to call Jim Olin on the phone when he would hear like a news story that said, the beach market is in catastrophic free fall or something, and he's like, it's the number one station in DC, and so I looked it up, and they were like number 11 in the ratings, and it was just some random stat that had nothing to do with Bethany, but. I had those Mr. Fisher calls that took me like a day and a half to assemble data to send them that would go through that. So yeah, it's good stuff. But
I've always wondered about that. If someone had been through that whole journey, and I imagine maybe they're with Casago today, right? It's possible.
It's quite possible. I mean, Brooke can tell you there's a lot of inertia with some of the owners that they don't want to make that change because they feel like there's risk. And those are generally not investor owners. Investor owners, at least in my experience, they look at the totality of what's going on. Some of the ones that have been there through thick and thin, they formed relationships with, say, their owner rep, or they were, or they had a pretty impressive repeat guest ratio, and they didn't want to mess with it. They felt like there was less risk by staying than moving. And in a lot of cases, they were happy with less than market revenue. They just were happy that they had 8 weeks rented before they had to even get to January 1st.
Well, yeah, you get so much repeat business there, and there's and my understanding is that market actually did very well for all the brands. Didn't matter if it was Wyndham, didn't matter if it was ResortQuest, and even Vacasa. It was my understanding, it was a very highly desirable market to get acquired from Vacasa, / Casago. So,
that was, and you hit it right on the head, Brooke, is that we did well enough to stay out of the microscope from the corporate office. And you're right. And we were consistently profitable. In my last couple of years there, we had 5 record years for online revenue, continuously growing online revenue, which, insulated us from some of what was going on at the quarter by quarter operations of the company. And in lean years, and it's in one of my points, but almost every year was a lean year. I can't remember a year where they're like, "Hey, we're flush with cash, let's do stuff." It was never one of those environments. So Delaware had always done well, and even when I was managing search for Wyndham Vacation Rentals, Delaware was always the top performer when it came to that, because their guests are so loyal to the area, and they're within 5 hours of 30% of the nation's population. So it's insulated from gas prices. It's insulated from all kinds of stuff, right, because of its proximity to its guests and its owners.
What was can you give a little bit more detail, like what your role was for, I guess, those brands, all the way from the beginning to the end,
Sure. I started out there as a marketing manager, spent probably a decade in that role, and then corporate shakeup. And I was Amber Carpenter now was the e-com manager at the time, and they were doing layoffs of all the local marketing folks, and they were like, just relax. We have a role for you at the corporate office in search based on how well the Delaware location had done digitally, so that then I switched into that role, and then that was senior manager search engine, and then another regime came in. They brought in a vice president of marketing who had a pharmaceutical background, and he decided to outsource everything. So they did that. At that point, they recognized they didn't want to lose me, so they opened up a role back at the location. So I ended up being a search engine marketer a senior marketing manager at what was then Wyndham Vacation Rentals, all the way up through the sale to Vacasa. But as Vacasa, as COVID rolled out, they were talking about expanding those roles they kept to more regional roles. So at the time they were discussing the Northeast would have been my territory, but that ended all of a sudden on a call.
Gotcha. Well, yeah, maybe we'll get to that, Brooke, as we go along here. Any other context setting, Brooke? We'll do mistakes after, I'm sure, but yeah.
Yeah, no, let's dive in.
All right, cool. Well, let's dive in. Let's talk about these mistakes, Tim. I think this is, valuable, like in context to understand where you come from. And again, a lot of questions. I've never seen, by the way, Resort Win Casa before. I like that quite a bit. That's a fun one there. So
I
let's
had to
dive
try
in.
to I had to try to condense it. It just became it just became too cumbersome to do otherwise.
Yeah.
And I left Locadia out of there because they're the only ones that made money in the whole deal.
Gotcha. I wasn't aware of that, so that's good context. All right, number one for the benefit of the listener was understanding what local means. Every location is a unique community of homeowners, team members, vendors, and the local business itself. The Resort Win Casa models failed, in your opinion, because they overvalued the brand and didn't prioritize serving the locations where the vacation actually took place. So, like, what's the lesson here? Is it that it's just impossible to do the national model? Is a different way of going about it? What'd you learn through that journey?
I think that the national models were they overvalued the brand. They felt like the brand was important, and at the time, um, with all the financial problems of ResortQuest, they never established the brand. There was no brand marketing that established ResortQuest as a brand. So why would anyone care? But they did care when it came, and I'll show my digital bias is that they're typing into a search engine vacation rentals in Bethany Beach. They're not typing in ResortQuest, going to ResortQuest and weaving their way all the way down through all the menus and drop downs to get to the destination. Also, there was a little heavy handedness in each one of those regimes about we're important and the owners will do what we tell them. And there wasn't and it was understandable. There just wasn't any money. I mean, they weren't making a lot of money. They were living quarter to quarter, so it wasn't like there was a time to do the education process and get them to move along that continuum. But vacations are local; they just are. And at least in our location, we are again 5 hours from 30% of the nation's population. This is a drive time destination. This is a beach destination. They can choose from the Jersey Shore. I don't know why anyone would want to go there. Sorry for my Jersey folks. Or they would start, Lewis, Delaware, work their way south. Lewis, Rehoboth, Bethany Beach, Fenwick, Ocean City, and work their way through it. So, but if people went to a certain beach, they loved that beach. They would never consider going to another one. So the destinations were important. The owners and the market conditions were important. I know Wyndham really wanted to jack up commissions. The prevailing commission in the market was 15%. The low ballers were at 10 or 12. And the push was, well, let's get to 18 or 20. But to do that, as Brooke will tell you more than anyone, is that you have to establish value in that. You have to establish the owners are going to make more money. You're going to pay better attention to their property. You're going to deliver better communication if you're going to charge 18 versus 15.
Yeah, I mean, maybe it's a bit of a business model thing, Brooke, because a lot of people have tried it. It seems like Tim had a front row seat to all this stuff, right? But it's like, the version that is, I think, if you look at the best run companies, they typically are pretty small. They're pretty regional. They're pretty local on that side. So I'm sure, Brooke, you've seen that a lot over the years as you've got.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. I mean, every company that I've seen, I don't know of one that's built a truly national brand that's actually been successful. I don't think there's many out there. I mean, the closest I guess came to was if you look at when Away Day came around, which I guess, going way back when it was Trigeron and, Village Holdings and, they consolidated all these companies. But what they had the foresight to do, which was brilliant, was let local be local, keep those brand names, if at all possible, keep the owner, keep the GM in place. You didn't come in with, a big national brand company. And they rolled up. I mean, the last count I heard was 33 companies. I think they're well over that now, probably pushing closer to 40 now. But you don't know which brands they have. In many cases, like the the owners don't even know they were acquired, like of some of these companies. That's how, where they try to just make it where there's nothing different. I mean, and then ever since, seeing Away Day's success, now you have Monarch doing it. You have Continuum, you've got Stayterra, you've got all these brands. And then it coincides to, I think Casago will probably have the one that has the best luck of doing it, where you actually do have a national brand, but it's the franchise model because the person that owns it is not, it's not Steve Schwab. It's not Joe Riley. It's the local operator, the local owner in that market that owns that, that brand, and local is local. So, yeah, I mean, I think this, we've seen this we've seen this played before, and I think local is local, and you need to be local. So.
Yeah. Well, it folds nicely, honestly, Brooke, into the second mistake here, that Tim was talking about. So undervaluing the frontline teams. Nothing's more local than the frontline teams, right? Like the people that actually talk with the customer, the guest, and the homeowner every day. And those are the people that maybe need to be listened to more. So what was kind of your experience, Tim, during kind of this journey of like, when was that person involved in these conversations about changing policies or changing procedures, that sort of thing?
Well, I quickly understood after I was there for a couple months and by myself that I didn't understand anything. That I had no intrinsic knowledge coming into the industry from journalism. I just didn't know it. So um, I actually, when I started hearing the front desk complaining, and check-in's horrible. I mean, let's get that right up front. Nobody wants to check in. Nobody wants to drive 5 hours and sit in a parking lot and then wait in line to pick up their check-in packet and go. So, I as soon as check-in started getting underway, I heard the grumbling. So I would sit on the staircase behind our front desk and I would just listen. And I tended to work late, which we'll get into my number 10. I tended to work late, so I would talk to the late night front desk. I'm like, what exactly is um, you know, what's the pain point? I mean, it's qualitative. I mean, you're going to get a skewed version of what's going on a little bit. You're going to get an overweighted or an underweighted evaluation of what's coming in the door. But they talk directly to customers. As the marketing manager, I talk to very, very few customers directly. I talk to very, very few homeowners directly. And if I did, it was usually got escalated from somebody else about, hey, my property isn't rented. Why isn't it rented? Those were easy conversations to have generally. But I've rarely talked to a guest directly.
Yeah. I mean, so Advantage, when we launched, my office was right behind the front desk, so I could hear everything that happened out there. And it is amazing how much you learn, when a guest is walking in or people are coming in and checking in. I mean, and honestly, when it was all hands on deck, I mean, we had, we were doing, 500 check-ins on a Saturday sometimes. And to your point, Tim, like it was chaos, you know what I mean? All these people trying to get into our parking lot within the same hour, and the parking lot fits, without counting employees, only holds like 10 cars, and you've got all these people trying to get in here. It was just absolute chaos. We tried to then separate and have check-ins at different days and things like that. But anyways, I digress. But yeah, it is something to be said about having that frontline access. And I took it to the next level. Like I would do inspections on Saturdays a lot of times too. Like I actually enjoyed being out there and just seeing what the team was going through because I knew I needed to learn it. It's one thing to sit up in your ivory tower and think what you're talking about, but actually getting out there and not only communicating with the frontline workers, but also actually doing those tasks really made it much easier. As we grew.
How often would you say, Tim, was there a dialogue between some of those frontline team members and someone in these like corporate offices as the company got bigger? Or was it like, if they gave feedback, was it just to like the local GM or the manager in that one office? And then sure, some of that might get filtered upstairs, if you will. But what was kind of the...
Oh, I can't remember a single instance where the front desk or frontline things were conveyed to the corporate office directly. I mean, it became more of a part of our local management meetings to really understand what what was going on. And we encouraged them to elevate it. Very early on, we understood that FAQs were important to resolving guest questions before they walk in the door and removing friction to booking. So we would always ask them, what are they asking? We asked the call center. We'd ask owner reps. We'd ask, we'd ask maintenance guys if they walked in the office. It's like, hey, what's going on? It was like, hey, I fixed the toilet today. But more importantly, it was like, yeah, we're having a lot of problems with carpet inside doors, which was a housekeeping issue. It's a maintenance issue. It didn't paint a great picture for a guest walking into a unit that they immediately felt was dirty because it was wear and tear on the carpet coming in, or those kind of things.
I'll take that one step further. So when after I sold Vantage and I went down to Orlando, we were building purpose-built vacation homes. After every home we finished, we would bring every department into our these homes. Every home we finished, we built about 25 homes, and we would ask we had a crew that did nothing but painting. We asked them like for feedback, and like one of the feedbacks was, the island, they were always touching up paint on the wall of the island because kids would sit there and they would just kick it with their feet. So we had the porcelain tile floor go all the way up the wall to avoid that, right? So that helped in the design. We would bring in, the reservations team, you know what I mean? And like they would tell us, oh my gosh, we hear all the time about the bathroom in 600 Muirfield Loop or whatever, property it was. So we realized it was that we had that one showcase bathroom that, grandmom or mom is the one that's booking it, absolutely love, even though she'll never probably take a bath in that tub, you know what I mean? But it just looked like something she wanted, and she's usually the one that's booking it. So we took every single department and got that feedback from them into all the way down to the design of the homes. And you'd be surprised, some of the greatest feedback was from the most random departments in the company.
I think we'll move on here in a second, Tim. I'm just fascinated by this because I think it is judgment to know when to listen and when not to listen to someone. And I'm sure there's horrible ideas that frontline team members would give to corporate sometimes, right? Hey, we should do it this way. And then someone at corporate will be like, that's a horrible idea. What are you talking about? But to Brooke's point there, you get the best ideas from that too. So to not even gather the information or not even gather the feedback, to me, I guess in a way it's not surprising, but in a way I'm somewhat surprised by that wasn't part of the process. So it's good to kind of understand, how that went. Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, I mean, ask the maintenance guys because we had, and Brooke's familiar with some of these townhomes that are the tall and skinny townhomes, the ones that have the tight staircases. The staircases will get banged up all the time from people carrying their luggage up the stairs. And feedback we give to local builders was put a rail, put some kind of rail or some kind of wainscoting or something along that stretch so that you're not constantly repainting it and it doesn't constantly look dinged up and worn. But you don't know that until either you start auditing work orders in bulk or you start talking to maintenance guys.
Yeah. The thing here, Tim, I mentioned earlier before our recording that I'm in the Myrtle Beach area. Obviously, we have a lot of golfers. They love to bring their clubs in and then just put them right against the wall. So, like, of course, that's depending on how they care for their clubs, the head covers, things like that. A golf club right against a drywall, boom, it's indented most of the time, right? So, same thing. Some of the units that I have here with my local client, they have actually, in some cases, dedicated areas for golf clubs that are made for it. They have like little stands, et cetera, for them, or they've made modifications where there's like a plate on the wall where if they go and put it against it, it's not going to crack the drywall, that sort of thing. So, little things, yeah, but they add up. If there's a big hole in the drywall, guests coming in an hour, you're not gonna be able to fix that, right? But if there's something there that makes it more sustainable, it works better. So I like it. All right, we'll keep things moving just to keep the pace of the show going. Number 3 was not focusing enough or early enough. I like that differentiation on owner growth and retention. So too late to assign dedicated owner reps and launch biz development efforts. Just kind of took what came in, maybe more so than making an intentional effort there. So obviously a topic Brooke knows a ton about, but kind of what was the evolution there on signing inventory? Because it seems like at the end you mentioned like there was a lot of inventory coming in. So what was the change that went through the process? How'd that go?
Well, I think it was a task that was originally assigned to rental reps. The rental reps were answering the phones and dealing with the owners, and it you can't serve two masters, I think is the phrase, is that we wanted them to bring the revenue in. The owners wanted them to bring the revenue in, but the owners also wanted you to take their calls. They wanted to know if they had a charge on their bill. They want someone to answer it. So I think that we didn't dedicate the owner reps early enough. And from a business development standpoint, I mean, like I said, we started out being 100% CCON. I mean, we were, if we took anything else, it was because an owner owned a unit outside of CCON. Then Bear Trap was built. We were involved in the building and sales of that golf resort community, and we got overloaded. Is that we were too successful at bringing on units in that community, and it outstripped our intrinsic demand. We couldn't scale the demand fast enough to deal with the inventory growth, and it hurt our reputation. It gave smaller companies the leverage or the doorway to walk into and say, hey, they're too big for us. They can't can't return the calls. They can't do the other stuff. It's I think ultimately, and Brooke knows that the history of this one is that we bought Seacoast Realty at one point during that acquisition, which jacked us up to 900 units or more. A lot of which we lost because now the big company comes in and buys buys the local company. But a lot of those units were dead wood. I mean, they were owners who were using us for services that we weren't making any money on. So it just came down to, I think at some point we needed to be more strategic about the units we brought on and whether they were going to be additive to the inventory or they were going to be a drag on it.
Yeah. I I think, it's funny. I just did a post recently. It was the title was something effective like how to launch a vacation rental company, get it off the ground and running. And one of the things I said though was in the beginning, you actually need to hire people that are generalists as opposed to specialists. And because they've got to be like fast paced, they've got to be proactive, they've got to be friendly, they've got to be detail oriented, they've got to be this unicorn. And you're doing everything, and that's what we did. So we had literally, our rental agents were doing exactly what you were talking about, Tim. They were answering the phone, booking reservations, while trying to answer calls from owners, as far as signing them up. And then they were that liaison, so they literally were a guest reservationist, they were a business development rep, and they were owner liaison, like all in one, depending on what it was. And it finally got to the point, after about like 3 years, I think once we kind of broke about over, 100 properties, 150 properties, we were like, we can't do this anymore. We did, we focused in, we just had reservationists, we just had owner relations people, and we just had, business development, as well. So, but you're absolutely right. You've got to do that. And I mean, you guys were in a position though, where the business was all coming to you. You almost didn't have to do anything. It was shooting fish in a barrel. There wasn't a lot of competition at the time. And it made it, and, partnering, I guess, with those developments made it really easy. You never really had to do proactive outbound marketing. I mean, I think you all would send like one letter, one postcard a year, and that was it. Meanwhile, I'm sending postcards, like 5,000 postcards every single week for 52 weeks a year,
Yeah, we didn't bring on a dedicated business development effort until very late in that process, maybe the last couple of years. And again,
we came out and started taking all your inventory.
Well, candidly, a lot of people were coming out and taking a lot of it. And yeah, that was part of the issue, is that, I was happy to let some of those go. I mean, they would hate it when I'd say that, but I mean, like, what did we net on this property last year? And if they brought in $3,000 in revenue, I'm like, we didn't make any money. They might as well be an anchor on somebody else's inventory.
Yeah.
I think you had a good note in there, Tim, though. I want to pull it out. You talked about the idea of like constraints almost, and it seems like it was a unique situation, a unique market. The company was positioned in a unique way to handle a lot of, the growth coming in on inventory, but then demand wasn't there. Do you think that was just a marketing issue? Like it was just not getting, not having a big enough marketing list, or what do you think the constraint was there on the demand side? How would you describe it?
I think it was, and I'm going to steal this, and I don't know who I'm stealing it from. Is that it was a lack of imagination. We never thought we would bring in that much inventory that quickly. And what happened is that your marketing brings in an existing amount of traffic. Traffic's not inelastic. There's only so much not elastic. There's only so much traffic in any given market for any given thing, and we brought in 25% more inventory. So we spread it out. So that made owners unhappy. It made, which opened the door for Brooke and other people to come in and swoop in on them. We just weren't prepared for it. And I'm not going to say it's anybody's fault, although I've never been shy about asking for resources. And in that case, we just didn't get them fast enough.
Yeah. I think it's, I'm sure, Brooke, some people listening are like, oh, champagne problem, too much inventory. That's not often the problem that I think most people face today, but it is a good lesson to hear with respect to like, you got to have these things in somewhat equal proportion, right? How many bookings can I drive? And then how much inventory do I have? And you want them to be somewhat equal. You don't want to have an imbalance way one high and way one low, that sort of thing, because your business won't be very efficient.
Yeah. And remember this is, pre Airbnb, and pre Vrbo. So they're literally like, to generate the traffic, like, it was not, you couldn't just slap it on Airbnb and Vrbo and get a bunch of reservations. Like you actually had to do really proactive marketing, which you should do. And that's why they also had a really solid business, because they did have such a great pipeline of repeat guests too. So.
Yeah, cool. All right, we'll keep things moving. So number 4, maybe you've kind of touched on this already to some degree, but number 4 was not fully leveraging internal opportunities. So you had the market's largest real estate brokerage and the HOAs that you were managing, and then nearby sister businesses, locations as well. But there wasn't necessarily partnership between those different divisions or areas of the company. So again, what was kind of lesson there? What would have been a more efficient, better way to go about it? Or how would you advise someone today on kind of thinking about that?
Well, it was unnecessarily territorial. Whether it was, the business units, were wholly interested in themselves. There really wasn't any call for everyone to say, hey, rising tide raises all ships. It was a lot of one-offs, and we did a lot of collaboration with the Outer Banks. because we share our southern part of our feeder markets with the northern part of the Outer Banks feeder markets. So we did a little bit of cross with them, but we were careful to do the cross in our off season when they were still in the end of their kind of heavier, warmer season. And they didn't have at the time, they didn't have any condos. They only had houses. So if they had people interested in smaller inventory, we were a better fit for them. So we did a little bit of one-off communications with other sister markets, but we with the real estate folks, and Brooke will tell you how important realtors are as a gateway to potential buyers or people interested in the business. We just didn't really do enough education and enough reinforcement of how this can be a mutually beneficial relationship for them, that they can refer to us and get referral commissions off that. We can also say, hey, homeowners have told us that they're interested in getting out, that they're interested in selling. We could refer that business back to them. We had, I don't know, almost 50 HOAs, and we really didn't do a good job of getting in the meetings and offering to. And there was a lot of resistance because they didn't want to be overly salesy on that side of the business. Their property management was they manage the HOA and their businesses are separated. We didn't do a good job of finding ways to maybe pay for their newsletter or pay for their annual meeting as a way for us to get in there and say, hey, we have a robust short-term rental business and we have a robust real estate business, and you can this can be a benefit to all of us. We just didn't we just didn't think about it in a forest for the trees kind of concept. It was more about how do we make each of these individual groups profitable, and the people in charge of each of those entities were only really interested in how their bottom line looked.
Mm-hmm. Is there any other additional things you would have done, like if you were GM of any of those brands at the time, to help get more business from those realtors? You know what I mean? Like you said, you had you had the largest real estate brokerage. Obviously you've got the largest rental company. Like, what more could you have done, I guess, to get those synergies between the two entities?
I think we could have done, at the time, we didn't have as many outlets as we have today, but we could have done, more proactive, and we got better at it as we went along, is giving them market performance so that when they weren't talking to a person says, hey, I'm interested in buying an oceanfront condo at Sea Colony of this size, here's the range of rental income that you can expect. Because we had that information. We had first party real information, not what some of the casual real estate agents had. They'd throw out a number. We'd be beholden to it because real estate professionals knew what they were talking about. But it's captive data that we could have shared more. There was a reluctance at one point, like we're giving away our secrets, but you're not giving away. But it's not really a secret. And if they wanted to call an owner who's in the program and ask them what they made, they're going to tell them.
Just giving a number is not a secret, right? I mean, you still got to do it. You got to execute it.
Yeah, and demystifying the process and walking in and saying, hey, this is how we onboard somebody. Here's how we communicate with them. Here's how we treat them as a partner. Because we're really asset managers when we're talking to a vacation rental homeowner. Because they not only want revenue, they want us to take care of their asset. They want us to advise them on what will make them more attractive in the rental market. We had a homeowner who refused to install Wi-Fi, refused. So, and he was always complaining about being behind. And I'm like, finally, I said, I will buy it. Marketing will buy the router, and we will put it in your unit. And when you make more money at the end of the day, then you can continue to pay the bill. And he was like, well, what if I don't like it? Will you continue to pay the bill? Well, he made a lot more money. Simply because he was one of the only units at Seacon that didn't have a Wi-Fi at the time, which made him, less desirable. He had to charge less to get in there. And I could never convince him to put a king in the master. He had a double in the master, which was one of those things where nobody wants to sleep on a smaller bed when they go on vacation than with the one they have at home.
Yep.
Yeah.
But
I think I've heard that before too. That's a good one.
Yeah. And we did a lot of advising. Like there was a golf packager, a bear trap, who was convincing our homeowners without our knowledge to change the bedding in the places at bear trap to suit golfers. I'm like, so we talked to the owners, and the owners are like, well, they're going to make us X in the off season. I'm like, yeah, but you make this in the in season. You're going to sacrifice that to put twins in all of these bedrooms because guys don't want to sleep together, which is fair. But at the end of the day, it's like, let us help you advise that. Let us help you figure that out.
Yeah. Yeah, it's kind of like what I believe, Brooke, is like evaluate the evaluators, like who's giving you that data and what's their source of information. And it sounds like, Tim, the company you guys had all the information, and then the people giving that advice did not have all the information. So maybe a valuable
Certainly.
lesson learned there. But
Yep.
yeah. Number 5, we can go to this one pretty quickly. Maybe it's a simpler, answer here in a respect, but hanging on to old technology. So using DOS-based systems all the way to the mid 2000s was obviously a choice that had consequences. Yeah, sure, changing tech is super expensive, but it's sometimes the only way to open up new opportunities. So this is a trick. This is an interesting one, Tim, because some of the, kind of pitches from some of these funded companies in the past has been, we are a technology company. That was kind of the Vacasa story to some degree. We're also seeing that maybe that was the case where before that era, maybe there was people that thought, hey, technology is just basic stuff that we have to use. What was kind of the thought process change as you kind of went along the journey there? Yeah.
Well, I have flashbacks to FRS. If anyone remembers the blue screen, uh,
You've
yeah,
got me on that one. I like to think
yeah.
I know a lot about the industry, but that
It
one, you
was
predate
it
me on that
was
one.
it was so old that it didn't have a dedicated field for email.
Okay. That's good context. Yeah.
So, it was comfortable. We maximized it. I mean, I like to joke that we made FRS sing. It wasn't intended to sing. It was intended to do that chirpy thing that modems do. But it limited our ability to maximize the website capabilities because it couldn't do as many things dynamically as the systems rolling out at the time did. I can't remember which entity forced us to move, but I think it was actually Microsoft when they stopped supporting the 16-bit system. That actually was one of the impetuses for us to move to V12 at the time.
What throughout that process, like how many, maybe you don't even recall, how many different like PMS changes were made during that time frame? Like how many did you see in your time there? It must have been half dozen, somewhere in that range. Yeah.
Two.
Oh, really? Oh, wow.
We went from FRS to V12 to Vacasa.
Okay. Wow. I guess there would have been more there. Brooke, what are your thoughts on that?
Well, yes, that's right. Because as soon as you went to V12, then they ended up killing it or something, right? Like,
right. I mean, they ended up picking the system that was end of life as well. Is that but again, oops. I mean, Brooke will probably remember this from all the white papers on ResortQuest and Wyndham. Is that they all tried to build V12 was supposed to be ResortQuest proprietary system. It was supposed to be the follow up when ResortQuest owned the software company, and then Wyndham dumped an obscene amount of money into trying to build its own proprietary CMS and ended up, dropping it without anything to show for it. And again, it's like the question is, do you want to be a tech company? And ultimately, some of them just weren't equipped to do it. Vacasa started as a tech company in large degree, so they had the infrastructure there to do it. But I can't remember what it was called, EPMS or something. That was a failed attempt to generate its own purpose-based technology.
Yeah, look, it takes a lot of resources to just maintain a system, let alone build and develop. Like, focus on what you're really good at, and then don't worry about the other things. Outsource the rest of it. So, enough said.
Yeah, for sure. And number 6, I feel like we did touch on this in the previous block.
Absolutely.
So I don't know if we need. Yep. Yeah, I don't know if we need to do more on it, but basically, growth without resources. So again, we talked about this earlier, but adding inventory without adding time and hours has consequences. If you grow the portfolio, we need bigger budgets. We need more demand to drive it, and that was kind of the gap that we missed earlier. Anything else you want to add in there, Tim, or is that just kind of reading into the record what you had spoken about before?
No, I mean it's to your point, is that you have to keep the owners happy. You have to. So if you're spreading your existing demand over more properties, that means most owners are making less money, and that causes a friction point, especially with trying to retain owners.
It's almost like, Brooke, I don't know if we've talked about this much before, but it's almost like having that confidence and to some degree almost like it takes like gall to do what maybe you should have been done there, which is like, hey, we're not taking new owners right now in this community. Like we have, if anything, we're lacking demand. We need to get more demand before we take on new homeowners. Would have been better off maybe saying no, or hey, we'll take you next season and try to fill up the current stuff you have versus taking too much and then again spreading everything too thin. I don't know, Brooke, if that's something you encounter a ton, maybe not as much now as it was before, but
yeah. I mean, some people are seeing that now, obviously, but we didn't see that. Like even though we were growing super fast, like we caught the wave of VRBO and all the other OTA brands where nobody else was really marketing on those, and we went all in on them. And this is back when it was really cheap. It was, you pay $600 a year or $500 a year, and you had pretty much unlimited leads, and you just do one or two per building, and don't update the calendars. And, I think we had like 85,000 inquiries one summer, you know what I mean? For 500 properties. So we had no problem with that. It was kind of the heyday.
With two platinum listings, $2,000 a year, basically for each one. Or
Yeah,
something.
well, and
One platinum listing for every building or every property type, and never updated the calendar.
and that's exactly what happened. Well, later when we had easy access to sync calendars on VRBO and FlipKey at the time, and the beginning of Airbnb, and then the education process of telling owners that we need to engage all channels. We need to reach the guests where the guests are in order to fill your units, and then we will do our damnedest to try to make them direct bookings later down the road. But we had to ignore any of those channels was folly. And I remember when I was renewing $600 listings on my own as opposed to rolling into the 8% commission model. It was funny because my last gig we were caught behind the Airbnb commission increase to was it 15-18% now because they
55 now. Yeah.
They at the time it was 3.5%. When we started with them, it was a 3.5% commission, and at that point, it was easy money. But at the end of the day, they're like, well, why am I paying you and paying them? It's like, because you have to engage again the guests where the guests are.
Yeah, so true.
Yep.
100%. We'll flip the page then. This is kind of a new one. I don't think we talked about this yet. So number 7, service centers as profit centers. You can't have competing priorities. So when you make money off basic service, quality suffers. Guests can leave bad reviews, owners hire private cleaning, or they find a new management company, and your reputation in the community suffers. This is an interesting one to me, Tim, because I feel like a lot of companies right now are talking about like optimizing fee, optimizing take rate, that sort of thing. And I remember when Vacasa went public, I remember the slide very vividly. It might have even been something that Brooke, you showed me. And it was Vacasa talking about the fact that they needed to take 50% of the transaction, ignoring taxes, for things to work. Like for their business to work, they had to take 50%. So what was kind of like your, I guess, journey in there? Because it seems like what you're saying is like, if you add in a lot of fees, that's a bad experience, but it's also like you need the fees to survive. What's your thoughts on that?
Yeah, it was a push and pull, but we had some really significant housekeeping struggles, and Brooke will tell you that market's tough. You're talking about 8,000 turns on a Saturday at the time, because there wasn't a lot of take up on shorter stays. We were getting into that mindset early on, but it was trying to turn a condo in 20 minutes, and you can't clean it to a degree where the guest is going to be happy. And I had some inside info. My wife, Paula, she's a rock star, and she was an owner rep, and and the front desk, because the front desk was telling me the same thing. We're getting destroyed by owners and guests, and that you can't overcome a dirty room. The first impression of walking into a room and it hasn't been cleaned well, you can't overcome it. There's no recovery in a lot of cases that can get you past that point. I don't know if Brooke has a magic formula for that, but if a guest has spent, and the best line I ever got out of Gaylord was, they said, it's not about the money, it's about their time. This is their one vacation of the year, and if you screw it up, they will remember it forever. They won't remember how much they paid for it necessarily, but they will remember that vacation was screwed up because they walked in and the kitchen was dirty, the dishes weren't done, didn't feel like it was vacuumed, or something more horrific. And Brooke has those stories too. But at the end of the day, it's like it's the core mission is heads and beds, and you can get to a point where I've listened to a bunch of podcasts where people wanted to get into doing their own laundry, but you have to have a high enough mass of laundry to make it financially feasible to do it. You have to have enough cleans you have to have enough properties and enough cleaners to clean them adequately to do it. And at Vacasa at one point, they said, well, hey, we're just going to pay a market rate, and we're not going to charge that back to the owner. We're going to pay them. We're going to charge the owner X, but we're going to make sure that we can absorb it and keep the level of service as high as it needs to be.
Did you allow owners to use whatever cleaning company they wanted, or whatever maintenance company, or did you require them to use yours?
There were a couple that had their own maintenance, but we allowed them to go with private cleaners when because it was sometimes the only way to keep the contract, is because they wanted to know that their cleaner, if they hired a cleaner and they were their cleaner committed that they were only going to have X number of properties and they could do it, they trusted that their cleaner was accountable to them and not accountable to us. But again, I mean, it's a push and pull thing. I mean, when you're trying to make a P&L and you're making that money, because it's easy to do that. But down the road as a marketer, and I'll be wildly selfish again, is that it costs 10 times more to get a new guest than it does to keep an existing guest. So, especially when we're competing in a market where it got a little mercenary at times, trying to get that new guest to pick us when they're going online and seeing reviews that aren't great, or trying to get an owner I had a lot of owner calls on this. The owners would call me up and go, I have a review, a 1-star review on for my property because you didn't clean it. I want the review gone because it's not about me, it's about you. And I went, I agree with you. I'll put in a report to Google, but we're just going to respond to it in a way that says it's not acceptable. It's not what we want it to be known for. But at the end of the day, I can't get that review removed.
Right.
We had owners drop us because we had bad reviews for cleaning. So again, it's an owner retention issue as well.
Yeah.
It's that critical moment, right, Brooke? Yeah.
Yeah. I was just going to say, well, one of the biggest hacks for me that kind of came up was I loved when a lot of times they were using their own cleaners, and we would build a relationship with them because I know they were cleaning other properties too. And that ended up becoming a great source of new leads for us. So we treated those cleaners, those independent cleaners really, really well, invited them to happy hours, invited them to our, vendor appreciation parties. And that became one of our number one sources of new homeowners.
Well, and I hope I'm not speaking out of school on this one, but I seem to remember that one of the downfalls of ResortQuest was that they didn't buy for the long term. They were an IPO. They wanted to flip the thing. They wanted to get out, and so the non-competes with the original owners were really short. So Doug Brindley had retained the pool clean. He was the largest pool cleaning company in the Outer Banks. So he maintained a relationship with owners that he had and owners that he didn't have in the inventory. And when he decided to go back into business, he had direct contact with all of those other folks. So again, it's to Brooke's point, is that major service providers, whether they're realtors, cleaners, HVAC companies, whoever it happens to be, they know who these owners are. They're in direct contact with owners. They might hear the owner complaining about their management company, and if you're top of mind, they're going to recommend you.
Yeah. That's clever. I never thought about that. Yeah, it's like keeping a line in the water, in a compliant way, and then going back there. Nice, I like that. All right, we'll keep things moving then. Number 8, not focusing more on long-term strategies. So living quarter to quarter, during the lean years, and like you mentioned earlier, they were almost all lean years. There was never time to talk about growth, 5-year goals, 3-year goals, that sort of thing, which it limited the ability really to kind of differentiate, grow, that sort of thing. So I guess, the answer is somewhat embedded in the mistake or kind of what you learned there, Tim, but like, what was the solution there? Was it helping local teams kind of set some of those goals, or what do you kind of see there as the possible solution?
Yeah, we started talking on a local basis about, how do we start shifting some things and introducing some things like, we introduced for the first time rate flexibility, because the owner contracts were defined by rate. You had to go to the owner directly if you wanted to drop a rate. So we introduced rate flexibility, saying we can go up or down 15%. I think it was the first year, because I wanted to get to 25. Because at the end, because I wanted to be able to push off-season longer stays. So I wanted to do stay 4th night free, which ended up being one of our most popular promotions, which really didn't cost anyone anything because you weren't getting a 4-night stay.
Right. You weren't blocking a future reservation,
Right. So they
rented Thursday through Tuesday, it doesn't make a difference in the off-season.
And the guests felt like they could leave later on that day, maybe not take the whole day. But at the end of the day, we had to get to 25. So we had to get to 15 first. 25 scared the hell out of them. So we decided that, if we could get to 25, we could do 4th night free. And then owners initially, this was an education thing, which is somewhere in here, probably the next point, is that we wanted to make sure that we were setting the owners up for where we wanted to be and where we thought the market would be later, and being able to go out there and say, look, everything we're doing is not a discount promotion. It's a length of stay play, because you're gonna net more money than you had netted previously. We did the same thing with including linens in the guest stay on 2-night stays in the off season, because we were competing against hotels. The owners didn't want to do 2-night stays because between commission and cleaning and some other stuff, they didn't make any money. So why would they even want to be in an off-season environment like that? So yeah, we were working towards, yeah, and ultimately we opted them into the OTAs. We opted them into VRBO and Airbnb unless they opted out. So we made it an opt-in, then we made it an opt-out to push everyone towards where we knew the market would be and where we could be competitive. But if we had a 5-year plan, we could have staged that out and done a much longer owner acclimation project to get them there. And I mentioned the DeHages first of all at the beginning. The owners I remember is that first of all, Mr. DeHasia loved the donuts at the owners meeting, so I'll always remember that. But he never wanted to do anything less than 7 nights. So we convinced him after a couple conversations and some more donuts, and we got him to agree to do 2 and 3 night stays in the off season. He said, "I made an extra 10 grand a year." Mm-hmm. So when he looked at it, he's like, so after that, we had his trust. If he said if you're going to recommend it to me, I'm going to take the recommendation. So and he told his friends, and we eventually got that kind of adoption. But if we had a longer term play, you could say we're staging this thing in. This is where we need to be in a couple of years. We're seeing it now. If we're on the leading edge of it, we don't get bypassed by other companies.
It makes sense. I mean, I think what it comes down to. Some people, you just have to prove it, right? You can't just say you got to prove it. And I think that's kind of something that still happens to this day. I promise you.
Oh, there was an awful lot of proving it during that period. Yeah, I mean, it was because they had gone, and Brooke can attest to this. They went decades doing the same thing.
Right.
Yeah, it's like, hey,
there was a long period of no change, and then a period of rapid change, right?
Yeah. Oh, they would agree to rates at the beginning of the season, and we wouldn't change them.
Right.
There were rate cards printed out, and when we finally went to, we're not going to put rates out, which is great for me because I had to manually enter them into the website. But when the rates became dynamic, and we could change them at will, when we got great revenue partners, and I'll shout out to Emil Shaw. I can't remember where Emil's at the moment, but he's in New York doing his own thing, he was involved in a startup of a vacation rental company up there. But we created the revenue generation team, which was basically revenue, marketing, ops, and we would talk about what makes sense. And we'd have market trends. Then marketing would talk about what marketing message we could put out, what levers we could pull on some of the other channels, and it became a better, more holistic, more proactive in a lot of ways way to run these properties.
Yeah, makes sense. You mentioned marketing there, Tim, so that kind of gives me a good bridge to go to number 9 here. Not marketing the marketing more. Marketing is obviously a core part of the relationship with the owner. Obviously, that's what drives a lot of guests in the door as well. So they need to know what you're doing to maximize the investment and justify their decision to partner with us. So annual meetings, quarterly newsletters were not enough. We're not frequent enough, I should say, to show all the ongoing efforts on their behalf. So one that speaks to my soul. But just what are your thoughts here on the marketing side, talking about everything that your team was doing there?
No, it's just because they ask you the question all the time, and Brooke will love this too. Is like, hey, I'm paying you 15%. Why? What are you doing for me? So it wasn't always a comprehensive list. We got burned on that because someone handed it to our competition, and they were like, oh, they're doing ads here, they're doing this, they're doing that, and it was more about showing them the effect that the website's generated X number of visitors, which is up from the previous year, showing that what we were doing was having a positive effect. But we'd always have to disclaim it to your performance may vary, because a lot of the stuff talked about the program, but we could have positioned it more often if we did maybe more of and the tools have gotten better. We could do it today, but to be able to tell people that, we're doing all these things and the rising tide raises all ships. The average property got X number of views this year versus last year, because they want to see it, especially in hard times. And we got, and it's probably on here somewhere else in the same thing, is that it's easy to give owners good news when it's good. It's harder to give them good news when it's not good. But news is news. I mean, you don't go trying to track down your financial advisor when your 401k dropped, because there's reasons why the 401k dropped. It wasn't the financial manager wasn't doing their job for the most part. You can see visibly that the stock market rose or fell. You can't see that overtly in the vacation rental market. the AirDNA reports didn't exist at the time. VRBO's market master, or whatever they're calling that product, didn't exist at the time. So we had to create and gauge that on our own. We could do it by looking at what other ResortQuest or Wyndham destinations were doing, but nothing was comparable to Delaware. So you can't say, hey, we're up in these destinations and down in others. I think we had an opportunity to not lose as many units by being more proactive in that communication.
And would the owner care, right? If you tell him, hey, the Outer Banks is doing really well right now, or doing poorly, it's like that owner's like, yeah, but where's my check for my property in Delaware? That's what they care about, right?
Everybody's wearing their me shirt. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
I love not marketing the marketing. That is so true. I mean, it's like you need to tell them what you're doing. Like, it reminds me, there's a quote one of our teammates says all the times, and he uses it in many references, but it actually works pretty well here. It's in the absence of information, people fear the worst. And it's kind of the truth. So if you're not telling them what they're doing, it reminds me, actually, we had an owner quit. I remember when I asked them why, and they said, when they explained where they were going to this other company and all the things they did for them. And I'm like, we do those things too, but I didn't tell them that we did those things. So had he known we're doing those things, had I marketed the marketing, he would have probably stayed on board. But that's a great point. That's one I'll jot down.
I was doing a copy for a client. No, go ahead, Tim. Sorry.
You can steal it, Brooke. I'm not. Yeah. I'm not claiming ownership.
Yeah. I did a copy for a client recently, Brooke. I was helping them with some copy with some marketing advertising they were doing. And I was like, can you just explain what you do? Like, I was like, hey, if I sign my home with you, let's pretend I'm an investor or owner of this market. And I was like, write down everything you do for me. And he started listing everything out, revenue management and this and the clean and managing. And I was like, doesn't that look like a lot? Doesn't it seem like actually 15% or 20% is a heck of a deal for all that work? And if the owner were to go and do that themselves, sure, they quote unquote make more money, but they also sign themselves up for a part-time job, and not really a fun part-time job, by the way, may I add. So, it's just a way to position kind of what this property manager was doing as a way of like, yes, you're paying me, but you're paying me for a lot of things that I'm doing. And by the way, I'm more efficient at about 80% of these things than you are doing it by yourself. That was the backside of the copy.
Right. I know exactly who to call when this happens, right? You know what I mean? You're going to have to go through 16 people, you know what I mean? Yeah. It usually happens like the flood in your bathroom always happens Sunday at like 9 p.m.,
Yeah. And I know the guy will show up in 9 minutes. Yeah.
Right. And your air conditioner will break on July 4th. At 6 o'clock at night. So that's exactly how it works.
Yeah. Well, speaking of these things, horrible things happening at bad times, maybe that's a good segue into number 10, ignoring work-life balance. So take time off, spend time with family, do a vacation. That's always the joke, of course, that a lot of people make these conferences is like the vacation rental industry does not take vacations. Enjoy your community. There's always more to do, but a lot of it can wait till Monday. So what was kind of your journey here, Tim, with hopefully finding that balance at some point? But.
Well, I mean, I was by myself for bunches of years during that process, and rightly or wrongly, wisdom is not the province of the youth, so I'm told. Is that I decided I felt personally responsible in a lot of ways for making sure everyone got paid, whether it was the owners, whether it was the front desk people, the maintenance guys, because without revenue, bills don't get paid. And without marketing, we don't get listings to sell on real estate. Without marketing, tennis tournaments don't happen, or aren't well attended at Sea Colony. So I took probably an over aggressive or over emphasis on my responsibility to make sure that my coworkers got paid. But at the end of the day, looking back on 90% of it, it could have waited. I mean, it was one of those deals that once technology got better, because, we had, like most tech companies, we had a deal, is that if the website goes down and we're not making money, you can call me. And I should have left it at that and said, look, if this is a P1 issue, which is what some of the tech companies call it, that stops us from making money, call me. But if this is something that if I fix it right now, it's not going to change something one way or the other until the morning, I should have just, off prioritized it. And, knowing what I know now at the end of that journey is that, companies are not families. Companies are companies. They operate as a business. After 19 plus years, again, I was laid off on a Google call for somebody reading a script with 100 people. So, at the end of the day, it wasn't that those 19 years of whatever didn't buy me any grace. when it came down to it. But
you were a line on a spreadsheet.
Exactly, and that's exactly what it was. I mean,
Not 19 years of experience and service.
And honestly, I don't blame any company during COVID for doing what they did. I mean, when you don't have any idea when you're going to make money again, you have an obligation to the business to make sure that you're right sizing your expenses.
You got to survive, literally, right? But at the same token, I think you're right, Tim. There's certainly a human element to it. And I mean, like, we have a recent example too, unfortunately, a more recent example, the Sonder collapse and the quote unquote hospitality that was not displayed, I would say, to Sonder, guests and employees and things like that. So we have multiple examples of this in our space of people just not handling that well, unfortunately. But
yeah.
Well, this one, just so you know, Tim, this was one of the most popular ones, this ignoring white work life balance, and it made it its way into the book as pretty much a whole section of a chapter. And I feel like it reminds me of, what's that book, Conrad? It's the 5 Regrets of the Dying or something like that. You know what I mean? It's like, not that we're comparing, leaving or being the vacation rental industry as dying, but it's like we all look back on it. It's like, oh my God, why did we stress so much about all these things? Why did we take it so serious? And why did we, spend so much time, doing it? But I guess you're in the throes of it. You have no choice,
I've heard a comparison recently too, Brooke, to like lions, how lions handle it, which is like they rest for long periods of time, then they hunt, then they get all their meat, and then they rest for long periods of time. And it's like, I don't know, I wouldn't mess with a lion, just because it happened to be sleeping. So I don't think it's a sign of weakness or anything like that. In fact, I think it's a sign of sustainability. It's like, I know there's someone in my life who like had a high paying job, burned out from it, and then hated working after that. So then didn't want to work after, whereas like if you can find something that's sustainable, you take your time off and then you can do it for a longer period of time, you actually make way more money, maybe not as much in 1 year, but over the course of a decade or something like that. So
you're so stoic. You're so stoic.
Yeah. Well, Brooke, it's all good. Well, Brooke, actually, you got to take the final question here. Proof that we are a little bit rusty. Normally we would talk about this before, but we didn't. So, Brooke, one more question for Tim before we let him depart for today, I believe.
Yeah, put you on the spot here. So, Tim, if you were to go back in time to your 25-year-old self and give a piece of advice, what would it be?
I think number 10 solidifies it. I think that I think being more self-aware of what was going on around me, and probably trying to be a bigger advocate for some of the things that were popping up and getting pushed down the road. I mean, again, if there was time that we could have tried to carve out maybe an hour a month to talk about future strategy, and seeing the forest for the trees, because in a lot of cases, whether it's personal life, whether it's professionally, is that everybody's focused on what's in front of them, but what's beyond what's in front of you. And making sure that takes some priority and some of your brain power along the way, and making sure that my kid graduates from college in May. So what comes after that? The immediate goal is, he has one last tennis season. I'm going to watch that. But then after he's done, how am I going to occupy my time? How do I best want to use my time? So that's what I would tell my 25-year-old self, is that, there's something beyond that goalpost. So don't hit the goalpost and figure out what's next. Try to figure out where you want that next goalpost to be.
Love it. I think that's a good way to end it. One goal we have for the podcast here, Tim, is getting more reviews. So we need a listener at the very end here to go to their podcast app of choice, iTunes, Spotify, leave us a review. As you kind of see here, Brooke and I are kind of recording again, so we're looking forward to seeing more comments and awesome things coming in the review side of things. Thanks, Tim. We appreciate it. We'll button up here. And if you have any other questions with everyone, just reach out to Brooke, and we're looking forward to having some more podcasts here in 2026. Thank you. We'll catch you next time.
Thank you.